Winston Churchill once said, "The only thing that ever really frightened me was the U-boat peril." That statement immediately describes the fear that the German U-boat created in the war. Not only did the U-boats destroy about 1,315 ships and killed about 30,248 Allied men, but it stopped the Allied ships from delivering the much-needed supplies that the British so desperately needed. If Britain won the Battle of the Atlantic, then it would greatly improve the Allies' chance of winning the entire war.
The Battle of the Atlantic had a great impact on World War II. It lasted from September 1939 to 1945, making it the longest battle in the war. In essence, the battle was fought because the German U-boats were stopping trades between Britain and America. America was neutral prior to the Battle of the Atlantic, but eventually joined Britain's side due to the bombing in Pearl Harbor, Hitler's declaration of war against America, and the British plea for aid against the German U-boats. Both the Allies and the Axis powers knew that if Britain surrendered, the Axis powers would very likely win the war.
The Battle of the Atlantic first introduced the usage of corvettes in marine warfare. They were lightweight ships that could easily escort a convoy patrol vessel. However, the British knew that it could not win the battle on its own, so it called for America's Navy to help make destroyer convoys, ships that protected the merchant ships. On these ships, there were supplies that the U.S. was sending Britain, such as tanks, trucks, and most importantly, food. Overall, the convoy ships would serve to patrol the seas and guard the incoming supply ships from the German ships and submarines.
Great Britain and the United States built new planes which would gain an enormous air coverage and constant scouting. These planes were also equipped with radar technologies to find U-boats and quickly dispatch them. Essentially, the British attempted to win the battle by throwing in as much defense as possible for the merchant ships and destroy any U-boats that would come their way.
Hitler knew that if he stopped the Allied merchant ships from arriving to Great Britain and delivered the much-needed supplies, then Britain would forfeit the war. The German battle plan was simple. The U-boats would travel in wolf packs and destroy any merchant ships that would come by. Hitler knew that he couldn't invade Britain's soil because he already had a battle with Stalin on the Eastern Front.
So the battle was essentially between the Allied passenger and merchant ships and the U-boats, the submarines, the aircraft, and the surface raiders. Remember, the Germans didn't use the Luftwaffe because that was used for Blitzkrieg, which is land battles, but this was a sea battle. So most of the battles in 1942, and during that time there was the most casualties and deaths and ship sinkings. When the Germans eventually surrendered from the war in 1945, the battle was won for the Allies. So why was this a major turning point? Well, Germany didn't lose too much in the battle. Like they didn't lose as much until 1943 when more U-boats were lost in Allied ships. But the reason why it was a major turning point was because Britain eventually overcame the U-boat peril, and they were able to take all the supplies and materials that the U.S. was sending to them.
Alright guys, you done?
Early in the war, hurricanes were used to fly over the mid-Atlantic by being launched from specially modified merchant ships. The German Navy only had a fleet of 56 U-boats at the beginning of the war. About 2,000 Allied ships were sunk during the Battle of the Atlantic. 1,315 Allied ships were sunk by U-boats, but only 781 U-boats were destroyed. Approximately 30,248 Allied men died by U-boats. Germany lost about 28,000 U-boat crewmen in total during World War II.